The Falcons are going to have to take it back to 2016 if they want to be a contender.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Aaron Freeman. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the NFL owners were making some big changes down in Florida at the owners meeting, but I think the two guys on this show might have a little something to say about that. And Deion wants to dictate the 2025 draft. We'll talk about it, but first, we flash back to 2016 with hopes to run it back even more on a positive note in 2024. So let's get right into it, guys. So the year was 2016, right? Aaron gets triggered every time he thinks about it, but I understand. He remembers that he was clean shaven back in 2016. And I remember having to do the one thing in the world that I think is like jumping off a building and then jumping in front of a car and letting 10 cars run over you, which is going back home. But that's 2016 in my little mind as well.
Man, a nice picture here, T.
Yeah. Want to talk about trigger? That's a trigger. But Jarvis, on the other hand, had a wonderful 2016 because he welcomed his firstborn into the world. And we just love ourselves, our oldest niece, Kelly. But another good thing really happened. And this is where Aaron and I can kind of go into a happy place. The Falcons actually had a monster draft class. So just running it back for our listeners and for our viewers, of course, first round, Keanu Neal, second round, Deion Jones, third round, Austin Hooper, fourth round, Devondre Campbell. And you know what was next, the franchise's first trip to the Super Bowl in 18 years. So I'm fast forwarding free to 2024. And I'm asking you this question. What does this year's draft need to look like in order for the Falcons to put themselves in position to get back to the Super Bowl in, let's say we'll give them 3 to 5 years?
I think the two main things you need more firepower on offense and you need a pass rush. So if they come away with a true difference maker in this draft in terms of another offensive weapon that teams are going to have to game plan against, as well as a difference maker on their front that offenses are going to have to game plan against, those are going to be the two biggest factors that I think are going to push this team over the top.
You know, Aaron, I think that's such a great point because, Jarvis, every time I can think of watching the games, whether it was us in the media section of the press box or the three of us doing the post game, and the level of frustration about us knowing and anticipating what the play was going to be, who was going to get the ball, and knowing if we as lay people could figure that out, clearly those guys on the other side who were scheming against the Falcons could figure out the same. So I think that's a great call, Free. But what would you say that you need to see, Jarvis, in terms of this 2024 draft class, reminding you of one of the stellar classes 8 years ago in order for the Falcons to put themselves into the position that class put this franchise in?
I think the Falcons are in a dire need of cornerback and edge rush. And I know people are like, why you say it in that order, Jarvis? I'm saying that order because just looking at this draft, right, I feel like it's top heavy when it comes to corners. And I feel like Quinyon Mitchell is a guy that potentially could be the guy that can satisfy that spinning wheel of corners opposite of AJ Terrell. I just think like they spin it every year. So I think you can put Quinyon Mitchell, a guy like that, of that ilk, or Terry Arnold, or depending on whatever your preference is, you can put that guy in that slot and just kind of leave it be. And then kind of catch some like the edge rushing class is still not as deep as I would like, but you can still get some quality talent in the beginning of that second round. So, and be able to satisfy those early needs early on. And I think that once you're able to do that, because you got a veteran presence all across the offense, it's outside of the wide receiver spot, right? Of course, you can satisfy that because that position is a little bit more deeper. So that's why I kind of prioritize the corners and the edge rushers over that particular position. And I think one of the interesting things about 2016 is the Falcons averaged what, 33 points a game that year?
Yeah.
How Shanahan was just dialing it up. I'll never forget when just kind of looking at the nuances of what he was able to do in game. Like I think Mike Bell had given me his seats for the game. Of course, it's like an end zone right behind the end zone, so you can get the chance to see certain things. I'll never forget it was Taylor Gabriel and Julio Jones. Julio Jones had lined up on the outside on this particular play, and Taylor Gabriel was in the slot. They called a timeout. Then coming out of the timeout, Taylor Gabriel and Julio Jones had switched. And I was just like, okay, what is going on here? The next thing you know, they had ran like a little cross kind of like a screen type situation. Taylor Gabriel took that bad boy to the house. I'm like, oh my God, dog. Like Kyle Shanahan essentially saw what the defense was doing, called timeout. Was like, hey, man, I need you all to switch because I like this matchup and what I'm going to see. And then boom, it turned into a quick 6 points. And those are the type of things that I hope that Zach Robinson brings to the table, because if this team can average, they've only been averaging less than 20 points for the past 3 years on the offense. If they can average 25 points a game, I'm not going to even go 33. Because that was absolutely ridiculous. If they average 30 plus points, Kirk Cousins winning the league MVP. I'm sorry. I hate to say that, but I would love to be able to say that at the end of the year. But if they get to a point where they're averaging 25 points a game, if you look at the final scores for the last 17 games in 2023, they will have a lot more wins than 7 for sure.
Yeah. And maybe we can say Kirk Cousins will be the runner-up, because it seems like these days win MVP don't get to the Super Bowl or lose the Super Bowl. So Kirk, don't shoot too high, okay? Yeah, shoot for bridesmaids. Yeah, shoot for bridesmaid status for you Falcons fans. But
like Idol, right?
Exactly, there it is. Be the runner-up. Like American Idol is your exhibit A. Be the runner-up. That's a better way to go. But Jarvis, you make a good point about where those needs are, because sometimes the areas of need could be dictated. And we know Terry Fontenot is all about best available as opposed to area of need. But on that same token, you can't kind of overlook the area of need. And when you kind of look out into free agency, for example, I think that where we are now, you can certainly still sneak in some good guys who may be officially cut on like June 1st, for cap reasons, and you may be able to sneak and get someone. But for the most part, it looks like all of the top names, all of the top free agents are kind of gone. So taking that into account and kind of looking at the needs that the Falcons have, we already talked about corner, we talked about pass rush. And, I'm just always sneaking an O-line to the right side. I'm always sneaking that in because I feel like there are some spaces and places where we know for sure you've got the best in the business or you've got the most consistent in the business. But there are still some places where there's some battles or a battle that could go on. So that said, where do you kind of see the Falcons filling those needs? Do you have a preference that they go in and do it in the draft, or do you see more so there's a possibility of them still picking up some guys in free agency?
Well, my general rule is if you want a bet to pay off in 3 years, go draft. If you want a bet to pay off right now, free agency is the way to go. And so for me, like, that's why I tend to lean more free agency, because it's like, I know this guy's going to be able to come in. He's a known commodity. He's been in the league for 4 years, rather than guessing and hoping that the draft pick that you're going to wind up having turns into that, over the next 3 to 4 years or whatever. So I expect the Falcons to try to do the best they can in terms of filling all their needs, some of which we've talked about already in the draft. And then I think they'll probably wind up doing what they've done the last couple of off seasons, which is be pretty active in May, in June, picking up sort of those plug and play guys. Like last year, they got Trey Flowers. A couple of years ago, they traded for Brian Edwards. Nick Kwiatkowski was sort of a depth linebacker. So I think a lot of those spots will wind up getting filled a little bit later in this offseason if they can't get him in the draft. So I do feel like free agency is going to be able to plug some of those holes.
Yeah.
And I think, being able to, that free agency piece is always interesting, right? Because those where you kind of find that, like, those veteran guys who kind of like on the edge, like, hey, and they don't want to have to report for anything in the spring, and they maybe want to report a little bit later than in the summer as well, because like those guys understand what they need to be, and I wouldn't mind filling in some of those gaps on the back end as far as with those rotational guys who can rush the passer. Like I wouldn't be against Bud Dupree, coming back, to be honest with
you. Okay.
You can say that Jarvis just to get teaser reaction.
Yeah, I think he just does it now.
I love
For
it.
kicks and giggles, man.
This is
Yes.
make this running gag every week talking about Bud Dupree just to get
Yeah.
Steve to make that face.
It's triggered.
I love it.
Triggered.
Just like that right now. It's spirit. So, but seriously though, like when you look at, I just don't want him to start. Like he can't be a starter on this team. Like I need some young talent that's ready to breathe some fire on third and long.
Yeah.
Be that guy to go to. And then once he gets tired, then Bud can come in and do his thing. But yeah, I think that's the mindset for me as far as looking for free agency. And I think that getting a corner to start opposite of AJ Terrell, I feel that's slowly starting to become a priority the more and more I think about it, because I feel like it's top heavy as far as the talent in this cornerback draft class.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if you can get that guy that's the best corner in this draft, or and as high as probably top 10 athletically, I feel like you got to go ahead and fill it, especially if you're able to trade back and still get them. I just think there are a lot of things that are working out in the Falcons' favor with them bringing in Kirk and not having to worry about trying to wheel and deal for a quarterback. So I think they're going to be in a good spot where they can get probably one of the best, most talented player coming off the edge or playing corner.
And I was thinking as well that they could sneak in, how out of nowhere, and of course, Brian Burns comes to mind, right? Because you'll have a player who is top caliber, who may even go into training camp and he's fine with the team. And all of a sudden, or maybe right before training camp, he's holding out and the deal just kind of works out to where the dollars make sense for the Falcons and they can go after someone who shockingly at this point in the season, we had no idea that person was available, but all of a sudden, for whatever reason, that player becomes available. Man, I'd love to see the Falcons kind of sneak in and get that guy as well. And I think that guy would be cool as a corner or as an edge rusher as well. So I'd be interesting and kind of intrigued to see if maybe somebody falls in the Falcons' laps at some point. Well, stop, lock and drop it, pop, lock and drop it, hip, lock and drop. None of it's happening according to the NFL in this season. And Jarvis and Aaron are not pleased. We will talk about it when we get back. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Now, granted, if you went chalk with the number ones and the number twos, your bracket's still looking good, but a lot of brackets are busted at this point. But this is where FanDuel can come in and still make it all good for you, whether you're betting on a big upset, like maybe one or two that happened this past weekend, or one seed, which that's a good look because all four are still moving on to the Sweet 16. It's time to go dancing on America's number one sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win it all. Is it UConn? Is it U of H? It looks like they are destined for a showdown. We shall see. But in the meantime, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Got a couple more weeks to bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. So, guys, we got word, and it was kind of foretold to us because Jerry Jones, definitely the Dallas Cowboys owner, said he didn't expect it to go any other way. He was right. The NFL banned the hip drop tackle today. Jones had said he absolutely expected it to be banned because he felt like, and I'm quoting him, you can coach that one. In my mind, that's one of the easier deals. It reminds me a little of the horse collar. That's needed. That's very needed. It's very obvious that it's injurious. That's the way he said it. But Jarvis, what are your thoughts? Because the NFLPA was opposed to this 100%, and yet the owners 100% approved the ban.
It seems like my initial reaction when I saw it, I was just like, it seems like every year they try to figure out a way to make it harder for a guy to play defense in the NFL. Every year, it seems like. It just seems like. And when I start looking around and searching around after you sit in the rundown, I was just like, okay, let me see what the if there's a justification out there for this. So I went into Atlanta Falcons CEO, competition committee chairman Rich McKay himself.
Rich McKay, yeah.
And he said, quote, a player literally grabs and then unweighs himself, superhuman type stuff, right? And lifts himself in the air and comes down on a knee or ankle. So if he comes down on his bottom, or if he comes down on his Achilles, or if he comes down on his calf muscle, then is it not a penalty or a fine? Because they say they're trying to go work towards more so fines than flags. And if you don't flag it and fine it, are you really taking it out? Because are you giving the player incentive not to do it on the field if there's no penalty for it? So it's just
Right.
too many questions that come to my mind when he starts talking about weighing yourself and lifting yourself in the air. So, and now a guy who played ball who kind of questioning it. So you're asking the referee now, the guys who barely can get the stuff that they do now right. You're asking them to say, you know what? All right, you're gonna have to determine this within a split second. Not only the players have to do it, but now you're gonna have to do it within a split second and say, I don't know if he quite unweighed himself on this particular play.
Right. And then, Aaron, it's something that the league is asking referees to be held accountable for and be able to do real time. But yet, you're not going to be able to practice this, if you will, because when you come and referee during training camps, it's not like this particular move can be you're going to see an example of it. It's not like this is something that's going to be a part of practice. So at what point does the technique kind of be something like, oh, wow, I can identify it because I've seen it enough times, enough reps of it to say, okay, this is the correct technique and this is not?
I don't know, Tenitra. I have no idea. Basically, this is just the continued NFL. They do it every year. They make it harder to officiate the game. The officiating's been terrible for a decade, and it's like whatever. I'm at a point. I'm Mike Tomlin where I'm just like, I do not care. Like they're gonna mess it up somehow, and it's like whatever. I've moved on. I'm apathetic to the whole thing. It's another rule. It'll either work or it won't. And it's like they'll make another rule next year, and we'll all hate it, and it'll either work or it's. I just like we do not care. I'm just like whatever. I don't care. I just like I don't know, man. Like the league just been doing this for 2 decades.
Ad nauseum,
yeah. It's just like
my whole thing. Aaron. I'm with you on this, Aaron. My whole thing with this, all of this stuff, right? Like, what is it that they're trying to combat? Because they always say, hey, we're trying to make the game safe. We're trying to make the game safe. Like, hide behind that, right? But like this, they broke this down. I think they said it had happened over 200 times last year. So essentially averaging out to maybe like once a game. So we're talking about, and they said like 15 players out of a couple thousand, over 1,000 players were affected by it. Not season ending. I know it was the Mark Andrews one, and I think Tony Pollard was. So we're talking about 2 players who had season ending injuries.
And Mark Andrews was injury prone already.
Right, no doubt. So we're talking about one guy who's not usually the type of guy that's on the injury report, and we're making a rule solely for him, or like, and because if it's a reoccurring issue, concussions, I get it. Yes. Those numbers were ridiculous, right? When we talk about guys being woozy and playing through all that stuff, and we saw all of the documentaries and everything made about that, all the studies that have been done.
Yes.
What studies have they done to say this is an issue? Yeah. Who said this was an issue? What person was protesting outside of the home offices in New York and saying, you know what, we got to get this swivel hip drop, not the hip drop, but the swivel hip drop. That's we got to get that out of this game. It is basically destroying the game right now. It's egregious. It's injurious. Like, it ain't even a word.
Right. I know.
A word to the Webster Dictionary, please. Yeah. Hey, call me dumb or whatever, because I've never heard that word said before. Injurious.
Yeah, no. I felt the same way. I was like, I'm a wordsmith, and I've not heard that. I don't understand. I'm confused. So now we're just making up words now to eat. Yeah. Or now we're using words from deep in the lexicon to rationalize this. And it just, I don't know. It just feels like too much policing of the game, for lack of a better term. And then if the lean is towards fines versus penalties, then help me to understand, because at least in the penalty, and here's where my mind went. With the penalty, it would advance the ball for the offense and therefore could potentially increase scoring, which the league is apparently a little bit concerned about, which we'll talk about that in a second. But once we found out that the lean was more on fines versus penalties, I'm like, well, now you're really confusing me. Or do we just want to put money in, like, how, like when you have a bet at home, and it's like the cursing jar, and you just put money in the cursing jar, and whoever wins the bet gets the money in the cursing jar. Like, are we doing? I mean, that's kind of how it feels. I don't know. It's just make this make sense, and we can't. But another rule that came out of potentially of this owners meeting round is the competition committee unanimously approved a tweak to the proposed hybrid kickoff rules Sunday, making touchbacks that go into the end zone on the fly come out to the 30-yard line rather than the 35. The adjusted rule proposal will be presented to owners for a vote. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, make this one make sense too. Like, how many times are we, and I'm talking about like bigger picture, how many times are we going to regulate the kickoff? Like, how many times are we going to touch that? It used to be the most beautiful thing if you could see someone run a kickoff back for a touchdown, because it was like, so, I mean, that's how Devin Hester made the darn Football Hall of Fame. Like, it was the most beautiful thing. I just feel like, once again, we're just kind of tinkering to tinker. Like,
Well, I can say
we still
that.
not care.
Right. I was reminiscing. Look, I could tell Aaron doesn't care. Like,
I know, right? Aaron's looking like,
I was
whatever.
the rules. I was like confused, and I was just, whatever. I don't know, man. I just
Yep, same here. That's why you heard me reading slowly, because I was like,
I don't understand what this is.
I don't know.
I don't get it, but whatever.
You think that was confusing, Aaron? How about this? This is another part of the whole kickoff situation. They're going to have the kicker kick off from the normal spot with the 35-yard line.
Yes.
And then, 35-yard line. And then they're going to have the kickoff, his teammates, the rest of the guys, line up on the other side of the 50.
Mm-hmm.
And then the opposing team is going to have 9 to 10 players within 10 yards of each other. And then they're going to be able to choose whether or not they can have one guy deep or two guys deep. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this math is just y'all know how I am with math. It's just a lot. Like, but I guess from a strategy standpoint, like, special teams coordinators can finally.
That's what I was just thinking. Like, Coach Marquise is really going to earn his pay this season.
Like, they're going to have to earn them. They're going to have to earn that check now, because essentially one aspect of their game they don't have to really worry about, because it never happens.
Right.
What, 20% of the time, more than likely. So yeah, I think it's just too much. Like, when you have to explain a play in football that in depth, that's how you know more than likely you probably need to just put this bad boy on the back burner and just be okay with you all have taken out a play, a special team play in this game.
Yeah, like I remember watching football a couple of years ago with a friend of mine who doesn't watch football and doesn't get football, and they kept asking, like, why is that a penalty? Why did that happen? I'm just like, because someone 50 years ago decided that was against the rules. It doesn't make any intuitive sense. Football, it's just arbitrary rules. It's like 1,000 rules. They don't make any sense. And like, that's why I'm like, I do not care. Like, it's at a point where it's just like, whatever, you're going to keep adding 1,000 more rules to the game. Are we scoring touchdowns? All right. Like, I'm here for the touchdown and the interceptions and the sacks and whatever happens all between that stuff is just like whatever to me.
Yeah.
I'll just, eat my sandwich and zone out or whatever. I'm at a point where I don't care anymore. I do not. It's whatever.
I feel like I need to be on a Zoom with Coach Marquise Williams right now and be like, okay, Coach, I need you to break all of this down for me, because none of this is making sense. And that's the fun part. Like, special teams was always like that fun part, exciting, because you just never knew what would happen. You always wondered if that was that one moment where that guy was going to break for that touchdown. And now it's like, I don't know. You just keep on making it the no fun league. And it just really, But anyway, if you want to hear more about this, certainly Jarvis can tell you about it. But before he tells you how you can get closer to him to hear his thoughts on all of whatever in the world was going on in those owners meetings, next up, we're going to talk about Deion dictating some things. And what's next?
How about this? How about I dictate to you guys? Hey, Locked On Sports Atlanta. Join subtext.com/Locked On Sports Atlanta. Join subtext.com/Locked On Sports Atlanta. Got a really cool series. I've been breaking down the top edge rushers. I'm telling y'all guys, you might be able to find some good nuggets on there. So make sure you go ahead and check out joinsubtext.com/Locked On Sports Atlanta. Also, you'll be able to text with me directly. I know if you're part of Aaron's Locked On Sports Atlanta Insiders, I know he has like 1,000, right? Because this dude just ridiculous, amazing. So yeah, I just need about 3 or 4 of y'all to come over to Locked On Sports Atlanta. So just 3 or 4, man. That's all I need. I don't ask for much in life, Aaron, man. Like I'm just kind of so yeah. If you didn't get the website because I stumbled through it, just check out the description box right now.
I'm sure Deion Sanders is asking folks, did I stutter? Did I stumble? No, I didn't because I said what I said. For Deion Sanders, it's all about saying what he means and meaning what he says. And he's going to stand on business. And this time it's about the NFL draft. And the former Falcons said his son, who of course is the quarterback, Shadeur Sanders, and his two-way star local product, Travis Hunter, who plays both cornerback and wide receiver, will decide where they go in the 2025 draft and not the other way around, as is traditionally the case. So guys, Deion said, quote, on the $1 million worth, $1 million. Look at me trying to enunciate. $1 million worth of game podcast Friday that I know where I want them to go. Those are Deion's words on the pod, right? So it's certain cities, he said, that ain't going to happen. It's going to be an Eli. Jarvis, are you good with your boy dictating what's going to go down with Shadeur? Because that's your guy. He makes you put you in your happy place. So are you good with him dictating where Shadeur and Travis go come 2025?
Sure. Why not? I mean, it's prime. Like a lot of people listen to what he says. And obviously, when he says some certain things, people get in the uproar, right? And I think that I'm glad that he kind of like sprinkled in and called it what it was, like an Eli Manning. Like, hey, this has been done before. It's like, hey, why can't I say that, am I better than Arch Manning? Can y'all listen to me? I'm a Hall of Fame cornerback. I'm one of the best players that ever played in the NFL. So I should have more say so than Arch Manning, right? Or Arch Manning. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Arch. I'm about the grandson, whatever. My bad. But yeah, if he's talking about Arch Manning, comparing careers, like there's no comparison. So if Arch Manning can say, man, we're gonna demand a trade. If y'all trade him or whatever, y'all can draft me, but best believe I'm never putting on their uniform, so why not? Now, the real question is, are they gonna acquiesce? Is the team gonna acquiesce to those demands? And that's gonna be the very interesting conversations in 2025.
Yeah, especially, and I think probably more so with Travis than Shadeur, because I think the quarterback, the position of quarterback, has so much cachet right now that if Shadeur continues to ball out in the next college football season, then that's going to allow him to dictate even more where he goes and what he does. I think it'll be interesting and intriguing to see how much leverage Deion can have on behalf of Travis. Because while the wide receiver pool and, especially someone two-way like that, who really does play both of the positions well, it'll be interesting to see if he can leverage as much for him. But what do you think, Free? I mean, that's interesting. I like the fact that Deion has the Deion gumption to say what he said and stand behind it.
Well, I said with the Mike Tomlin, we do not care. Like, to me, this is the, what's her name? Monique. I would love to see it, like, I just want to see how it plays out. Like, I'm my opinion basically with Jarvis, like, cool. All right. Let's see what happens. Like, this is fascinating. Like I another thing to talk about in the pre-draft process as we sit there and talk about every single possible storyline and narrative over the 3 to 4 months leading up to the draft. Sure. Let's add another wrinkle. So something else that we could talk about, and let's see how it all plays out. So I'm all for it. I'm all for the drama. I'm all for whatever, happens. If Deion pulls it off or he doesn't pull it off, I'm there for it regardless. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do, if he can do it, all that stuff.
And I think I'm with you, Aaron, on that. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is the fact that he said that they're going to go top 4. I was just like, okay, Travis Hunter going to go a top 4. All right, okay, Prime. Like, some things that I don't know now. Now, granted, dude is a hell of a player. Don't get me wrong, but wow, a top 4
but
and a guy
4,
that you talking about a two-way guy? Like, they don't do that anymore in the league, Prime. I'm sorry. He going to have to choose at some point, unless he's plays corner and then, he can return. They say he can return some kicks or something like that. I can see him being that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
We saw Deion and D'Angelo Hall play corner, and you get a sprinkling of them on offense. But we haven't really
Yeah.
seen a wide. I guess what Troy Brown for the Patriots was a wide receiver, and you saw
Yeah, and the
sprinkling
nickel
of
Yeah,
corner.
that's a
one
good
of
call.
these.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's like
But
we've
think
seen
about the
we've seen a
fact that you had to
sprinkling,
think
but
about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. You had to think about it. And also, I think that to do justice for Travis, honestly, if you want him to be in that top 4, you should let him choose. Either he needs to focus on being a lockdown, shutdown type of corner, or he needs to focus on using that speed to show you just how good of an over the top receiver he can be. That'll probably get him locked in the top 5. But I do think you guys are right. We don't really see two-way play like that in the league, and it's just probably better to decide which skill position you want to play and then just focus on that for this next season and keep allowing your draft stock to rise. So it's going to be interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, Jarvis, you want to wrap?
No, I just want to just add real quick. I think, and when you think about just Prime from an injury standpoint, right? We know Hunter has dealt with those injuries. Like, the man is playing a lot of freaking plays on both sides of the ball. So yeah, just for his longevity standpoint, I feel like, Prime needs to make that decision as his head coach. I know
Yeah.
that's kind of like the whole mentor piece, and he looks up to you and idolizes you and all that stuff. He's probably gonna do whatever you tell him to do, man. So I think just from a longevity standpoint, he needs to kind of just dial back, at least on the offensive side of the ball, because they got some
Yeah, I
skill.
kind
They
of,
got skill
yeah,
guys on that side. So yeah, I think
yeah,
that they can dial it back a little bit on that, because you want him to be around for a full season, because you don't
yeah,
want that narrative to get out, or he would definitely won't go top 5. Hey, he's so
right.
injury prone. Nah, so you don't want that to get out about him as well. So
Yeah, and I think with him playing, and I would agree with you. I think his best bet is to go corner. I see him as being able to go up the draft board much faster if that's the position he's playing, as opposed to, like you said, they've got bodies, and they'll probably have even more bodies come next year when it comes to that particular position. Listen, we appreciate you guys as always stopping by our Atlanta football party. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. Also, of course, you can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will see you tomorrow on the Atlanta football party, the Dogs edition.